I recommend that learners focus on increasing their listening practice that matches what they want to sound like. So if you're a guy, then use videos or podcasts that have male speakers and make more male friends, and if you're a girl, then vice versa. Back when I was an intermediate speaker, I had a friend who spent much of his time hanging out with Korean girls, and as a result, his Korean sounded like he was a Korean girl, and he had no idea that he spoke like that. And this is because men and women in Korea speak a bit differently. Not only their intonation now, women, for example, might have more of a rising intonation in their sentences than men, but sometimes people might pronounce words differently, or they might even use completely different words and expressions. For a really quick example, you might already know this. If you're a guy, you would refer to an older female friend or an older sister as 누나, and an older male friend or an older male sibling as 형. Or if you're a female, you would refer to an older female friend or your older sister as 언니, and an older male friend or an older brother as 오빠. But that's not it. There are more things to know. I'm not saying now if you're a guy, you should only hang out with guy friends and vice versa. Speak however you want. Don't let anyone tell you no. I'm only saying that there are some differences. So make sure to have multiple resources that you can use to match the way that you want to sound. Now, this question was actually suggested to me numerous times by channel members and Patreon supporters, so it's time that I deliver. Again, thank you to my supporters. If you are one of my paid supporters, you really keep the lights on here. And if you are also interested in becoming a supporter, I have links to my Patreon as well as how to join my YouTube channel in the description box below. One of the first differences I want to point out is that in some grammar forms, the sound O can be changed to U. For example, the grammar form 고. This one means and, or and then, for connecting sentences together. And women might more often pronounce this as 구. So instead of saying something like 그리고, you might also hear more commonly from women 그리고. And there's a reason for this. It's because changing the O to the U sound in these grammar forms sounds a little bit softer and more friendly. In addition, there's the common expression 아이고. Now, this isn't actually, I take it back, it's not really that common anymore, but women might pronounce this more often as 아이고. Another example is the grammar form 도, meaning also or even, like when you say me too. In fact, saying me too normally would be 나도. But you might hear 나도. And I should also note that this whole thing is also kind of a part of what's known as Eggyo, which I will be mentioning a little later in this video. This is just the first thing though. Let me clear the board and I'll show you some more. Next, we have the nya, question ending. So this would be the end of a sentence for a question. You might hear females more often saying this as ni. The reason is because ni sounds much softer than nya, which can sound more harsh. For a quick example, you could have 있니, like if you're asking someone if they have something, 있니 or 있냐. You might hear 있니 used more by females than by males. However, males also use this one too. Just keep in mind it has more of a softer feel. The next one that we have is the Kunyo sentence ending. So this one is for expressing that you've realized something. And typically it would be kun in casual speech or kunyo when you're being more polite. And while men might more typically use kun when they're speaking casually, women tend to favor, at least typically, again, this is a generalization, women tend to favor the kuna ending, which has the same meaning. Again, this doesn't mean that men don't use the kuna ending. I do. I use it because it sounds softer. It sounds less stiff and less official than kunyo, which sounds more, I think to me it has a little bit more of a stiff feeling. So this is more soft and friendly sounding. And next we have the very common yo ending. You'll hear this pronounced by women more often as yo. Can you guess the reason why? Well, yeah, it's the same. It's because yo sounds a little bit more soft and a little bit more friendly. For example, you might hear something like 안녕하세요. Sounds a little bit more friendly and a little bit lighter than 안녕하세요. Or you might hear 고마워요 for thank you. I also think it's easier to pronounce yo than yo, so I tend to use this as well. This next difference is more for advanced level speakers, and that is hageche, politeness level. This one is used by someone of a higher rank, like a level than a person, older than another person. And it's used to speak down casually, but it has a friendly feel to it. However, it's not used for older family members to speak down to younger family members. It would sound a bit awkward for that. Now, older people today will still sometimes use this style, but it's less useful to learn nowadays. And this form overall can have more of a masculine feeling nowadays. An example would be the ke ending. Now, this is not ke for making adverbs, and it's also not like 할게요 or anything like that. This would be an older form which is part of this politeness level. Let me give you an example sentence. For example, 그렇게 하게, like do that. And this has more of a masculine feel to it, so it tends to get used a little more by males than females. Another example would be the word for you in 하게체, which would be 자네. This would also be used more often by males than females. However, again, I'm not saying women wouldn't use this, simply that men tend to use it more. Now let's do an example expression. Omo or omona, meaning my goodness or oh dear. Well, these sorts of expressions are used more commonly by women than by men. However, if you were to say omona and you're a male, nobody's going to care. It's more common that men would use something a little bit shorter. For example, you might hear just ah or at or even just 헐, like oh my goodness. In fact, I use 헐 all the time. Okay, next let's talk briefly about something that's called Eggyo. This is a way of speaking in a flirtatious manner, trying to sound like you're cute or sound playful. All of that is Eggyo. And depending on who's doing it and who likes that person who's doing it or who doesn't like that person, this sort of thing, Eggyo, can either sound cute or really annoying. And since the person using any sort of Eggyo is trying to sound playful, it can also kind of sound softer, and therefore it tends to get used more by women than by men. Except in K-pop, where you might even hear more men using it than women. One quick example is adding this letter, which is known as iang, has kind of an ng sound, to the end of a word or expression. For example, normally you might say something like 그래요, like okay, it could become 그래요. Eggyo is a large category of several different types of grammar and expressions that you can use, but it also includes what I'll just call baby talk. I'll just give you an example. Normally you might say something like 알겠어, like okay, I got it. Babies can't really pronounce this very well, so instead you end up with something like this. 알겠어. Now I can make a whole video about Eggyo, but I won't. Don't ask. One more thing that you might hear more used by women than by men is lengthening vowel sounds. So when someone lengthens the final vowel sound in a sentence, this sounds softer. In the expression 잘 먹었습니다, so thanks for the food, I ate well, I enjoyed the meal. 잘 먹었습니다. Notice you can lengthen it, and that's to sound softer, and that will also be done more often by women than by men. Or another example, just for 감사합니다. You might hear 감사합니다. I do that sometimes too. Now, Busan dialect, or anywhere in the Gyeongsang province, is also another place where there are some differences between how men speaking Korean and women speaking Korean, how they're perceived differently. Men who speak in this sort of dialect, like Busan dialect, are often seen by other people who are not from there as sounding more masculine. And women who speak in Busan dialect, or any of these dialects, are often seen by people not from there as sounding more cute. Now, this has nothing to do with being more masculine or cute. It's just how this is perceived relative to Standard Korean. Standard Korean, however, which is used just in Seoul, typically has overall a more gentle feeling, kind of a kind feeling, regardless of who's speaking it, again, to people who are not from that area. And in fact, each dialect in Korea, and there are 6 major regions and, variations within those, each dialect can have its own feeling, its own nuance associated with it. And I have videos about many different dialects on my channel, which you can find if you're interested in that sort of thing. I just want to clarify, the point of this video isn't to just say, I want you to memorize everything that, guys say this and girls say that, and this is what you should use, and, don't use these if you're not this gender. Obviously, no. Again, we're in 2023 now, and you can speak however you want. I want you to be aware how you might come across depending on the way that you're speaking, the grammar forms that you're using. Because it should be your choice how you want to sound, and you should know how you sound to other people. Because when I was a beginner, I couldn't tell the difference, and the way that I ended up speaking was just due to the people that I was surrounded by. I was kind of imitating the other people that I was hearing. But again, yes, you can speak however you'd like, just kind of know the different nuance of some of these examples that I've given you here. So, what other language differences have you noticed before? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious if I missed anything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in another episode. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.